The First Step by Leo Tolstoy. Chapter 9. Fasting is a necessary condition of a good life. But in fasting, as in restraint generally, the question arises, where do we begin? How does one fast? How often should one eat? What should one eat? What should one give up? Just as no work can be done seriously without taking its steps in order, so fasting is impossible without knowing where to begin. Where to begin restraint in food, fasting, and even a working out of how to fast and where to start. The idea strikes most people as laughable, as wild. I remember how proud of his own originality and evangelical was a man given to attacking the asceticism of the monks, when he said to me, "My Christianity is not a matter of fasting and privations, it stands on beefsteaks. Christianity, or virtue in general, with beefsteak. So many wild, immoral things have eaten their way into our life, especially into that lowest region of the first step toward a good life, our relation to food, which hardly anyone pays attention to, that we can barely grasp the audacity and the madness of claiming in our day Christianity or virtue with beefsteak. We are not horrified by the claim only because a strange thing has happened to us. We look and do not see, we listen and do not hear. There is no stench a man cannot get used to, no sound he cannot stop hearing, no ugliness he cannot stop seeing, until he no longer notices what would stagger anyone unaccustomed to it. It is exactly the same in the moral realm. Christianity and morality with beefsteak. The other day I visited the slaughterhouse in our town of Tula. It is built on the new improved system used in the big cities, designed so that the animals being killed suffer as little as possible. It was a Friday, 2 days before Trinity Sunday. There were many cattle. Long before, when I read that excellent book, The Ethics of Diet, I had wanted to visit a slaughterhouse, to see with my own eyes the substance of the thing people are talking about when they discuss vegetarianism. But I kept feeling ashamed, the way one is always ashamed to go and watch suffering that is certain to happen and that one cannot prevent, and so I kept putting it off. But recently I met a butcher on the road. He had been home for a visit and was on his way back to Tula. He is not yet a skilled butcher. His job is to stab with the dagger. I asked him whether he wasn't sorry for the animals he kills. He gave the answer they always give. Why be sorry? It has to be done. But when I said that eating meat is not necessary, he agreed. And then he agreed that he was sorry too. What can I do? I have to earn my bread, he said. At first I was afraid to kill. My father never killed so much as a chicken in his life. Most Russians cannot kill. They feel pity, and they express the feeling with the word afraid. But he was no longer. He told me the heaviest work falls on Fridays and goes on into the evening. Not long ago, I also fell into conversation with a soldier, a butcher, and he too was surprised when I said it was a pity to kill. He said the usual things about it being ordained, but then he agreed, especially when the beast is quiet and tame. The poor deer walks in trusting you. It's a real pity. Once, we were walking from Moscow, and some carters gave us a lift. They were driving from Serpukov to a wood to fetch timber for a merchant. It was the Thursday before Easter. I rode in the front cart with the carter, a strong, red-faced, coarse fellow who clearly drank hard. As we entered a village, we saw a well-fed, naked pink pig being dragged out of the first yard to be slaughtered. It squealed in a desperate voice, like a human scream. Just as we were passing, they began to kill it. A man slashed its throat with a knife. It squealed louder still, and more piercingly, tore itself free, and ran off streaming blood. I am nearsighted and did not see the details. I saw only the pig's pink, human-looking body and heard its desperate squeal. But the carter saw all the details and watched without turning his eyes away. They caught the pig, knocked it down, and finished cutting its throat. When its squealing died away, the carter sighed heavily. "Can it really be that no one will answer for this?" he said. "That is how strong the aversion to all killing is in human beings. But by example, by feeding people's greed, by declaring that God has permitted it, and above all by habit, people are brought to the point where this natural feeling is lost entirely." On the Friday I set off for Tula, and meeting a gentle, kind man I know, I invited him along. "Yes, I've heard the arrangements there are good, and I've been wanting to see it, but if they're slaughtering, I won't go in." "Why not?" "That's exactly what I want to see. If we eat meat, the animals have to be killed." No, I can't. The remarkable thing is that this man is a hunter, and kills birds and animals himself. We arrived. Already at the entrance there was a heavy, foul, rotting smell, like carpenter's glue, or paint mixed with glue. The closer we came, the stronger it grew. The building is of red brick, very large, with vaults and tall chimneys. We went in through the gates. To the right was a big fenced yard, 3/4 of an acre or so, the open ground where cattle for sale are driven in 2 days a week, and at the edge of it, the porter's lodge. To the left were what they call the chambers, rooms with arched doorways, sloping asphalt floors, and tackle for hoisting and moving the carcasses. Along the wall of the lodge, on a bench, sat 6 butchers in aprons soaked with blood, their rolled-up sleeves showing muscular arms, spattered with it. They had finished work half an hour before, so that day we could see only the empty chambers. Though the doorways stood open on both sides, a heavy smell of warm blood hung in each chamber. The floor was brown and glossy, and in its hollows stood black, congealing blood. One of the butchers described how the slaughtering is done, and showed us the place where it happens. I did not quite understand him, and formed a false but very terrible picture of how it is done. And I thought, as so often happens, that the reality would probably make a weaker impression on me than my imagination had. In this I was mistaken. The next time I came to the slaughterhouse in good time. It was the Friday before Trinity, a hot day in June. The smell of glue and blood was even stronger and sharper in the morning than on my first visit. The work was in full swing. The whole dusty yard was crowded with cattle, and animals had been driven into all the pens beside the chambers. In the street outside the entrance stood carts with oxen, heifers, and cows tied to their rails and shafts. Drays drawn by good horses, loaded with live calves whose heads hung down and swayed, drew up and were unloaded, and drays just like them, loaded with the carcasses of oxen, stiff legs sticking up, with their heads, their bright red lungs and brown livers, drove away from the slaughterhouse. The dealers' saddle horses stood by the fence. The dealers themselves, in their long coats, whips and knouts in hand, walked about the yard, marking with tar the cattle of one owner, or bargaining, or steering oxen and bulls from the big yard into the pens that led straight into the chambers. These men were all absorbed in money, in deals and calculations, and the thought of whether it was right or wrong to kill these animals was as far from their minds as the chemical composition of the blood that flooded the chamber floors. Not one butcher was to be seen in the yard. They were all in the chambers, working. That day about 100 head of cattle were slaughtered. I went into one chamber and stopped at the door. I stopped both because the chamber was crowded with carcasses being moved about, and because blood was running below and dripping from above. All the butchers in there were smeared with it, and had I stepped into the middle, I would certainly have been smeared too. One carcass was being taken down from its hook, another moved toward the door, and a third, a slaughtered ox, lay with its white legs in the air, while a butcher with a strong fist ripped open the tight-stretched hide. Through the door opposite the one where I stood, a big, red, well-fed ox was being led in at that very moment. 2 men were dragging it. It had hardly entered when I saw a butcher raise a dagger over its neck and strike. The ox, as if all 4 legs had been knocked from under it at once, crashed down on its belly, rolled straight over on one side, and began beating with its legs and its whole hindquarters. At once one butcher threw himself on the front of the ox, away from the kicking legs, seized its horns and forced its head to the ground, and another butcher cut its throat with a knife. From under the head gushed blackish red blood, and a blood-smeared boy set a tin basin under the stream. The whole time this was being done, the ox kept jerking its head, as if trying to get up, and beat all 4 legs in the air. The basin filled fast, but the ox was still alive. Its belly heaving hard, it lashed out with its hind legs and its 4 legs, so that the butchers kept clear of it. When one basin was full, the boy carried it away on his head to the albumin works, and another boy set a fresh basin, which began filling in its turn. But the ox still heaved its belly and jerked its hind legs. The butcher lifted the ox's head and began to skin it. The ox went on writhing. The head was stripped bare, red with white veins, and lay however the butchers turned it. The hide hung down on either side of it. Still the ox did not stop writhing. Then another butcher seized one of its legs, snapped it, and cut it off. Shudders still ran through the belly and the remaining legs. The rest of the legs were cut off too, and thrown where the legs of that owner's oxen were being piled. Then the carcass was dragged to the hoist and hung up, and there the movements ended. So I watched, from the door, as the second ox was killed, and the third and the fourth. With each it was the same skinned head with its bitten tongue, the same beating hindquarters. The only difference was that the striker did not always hit at once, the spot that drops the animal. Sometimes he missed, and the ox reared up, bellowed, and streaming blood, fought to break loose. Then it was hauled under a bar, struck a second time, and fell. Later, I went around to the door through which the oxen were let in. Here I saw the same thing, only closer, and so more clearly, and here I saw, above all, something I had not seen from the first door, how the oxen were forced to go through it. Each time an ox was taken from the pen and dragged forward on a rope tied to its horns, it smelled the blood, dug in, and sometimes bellowed and backed away. 2 men could never have hauled it in by force, so every time one of the butchers went around behind, took the ox's tail and twisted it near the root, till the gristle crunched and the ox lurched forward. When they had finished the cattle of one owner, they brought in another's. The first animal of this new lot was not an ox but a bull, a pedigree animal, a beauty, black with white markings on his legs, young, muscular, full of power. They pulled at him. He lowered his head and dug in hard, but the butcher walking behind took hold of his tail, the way an engine driver takes hold of a whistle handle, and wrenched it. The gristle crunched, and the bull sprang forward, knocking down the men on the rope, then dug in again, squinting sideways with a black eye, its white flooded with blood. But the tail crunched again, and the bull sprang forward, and now he was where they wanted him. The striker came up, took aim, and struck. The blow missed its mark. The bull leaped, tossed his head, bellowed, and covered in blood, tore free and rushed back. The whole crowd at the doorway sprang aside, but the practiced butchers, with the daring of men who live with danger, quickly caught the rope. Again the trick with the tail, and again the bull was in the chamber, dragged under the bar, from which he did not get away a second time. The striker quickly found his aim, the little spot where the hair swirls into a star, found it despite the blood struck, and the splendid animal, brimming with life, crashed down and thrashed with its head and legs, while it was bled, and the head was skinned. "See, the damned devil, couldn't even fall where he ought," grumbled the butcher, cutting the hide from its head. 5 minutes later the head stood propped up, raw red instead of black, stripped of its skin, its eyes fixed and glassy, that 5 minutes before had shone with such splendid color. Afterward, I went to the section where the small animals are killed. A very large, long chamber with an asphalt floor and tables with raised backs, on which sheep and calves are slaughtered. The work there was already over. In the long chamber, saturated with the smell of blood, only 2 butchers remained. One was blowing air into the leg of a dead lamb and patting its swollen belly with his palm. The other, a young fellow in a blood-spattered apron, was smoking a cigarette bent at the end. There was no one else in the gloomy, long chamber with its heavy smell. Just after me came a man, an ex-soldier by the look of him, carrying this spring's young ram, black with a white mark on its neck, its legs tied. He laid it on one of the tables as if on a bed. The soldier evidently knew the butchers. He greeted them and began asking when their master gave them time off. The fellow with the cigarette came over with a knife, straightened its edge on the rim of the table, and answered, "On the holy days." The living ram lay as quietly as the dead, inflated one, only it wagged its short little tail briskly, and its sides rose and fell faster than usual. A soldier held down its lifting head lightly, without effort. The butcher, still carrying on the conversation, took the ram's head in his left hand and cut its throat. The ram shuddered, and the little tail stiffened and stopped wagging. While he waited for the blood to drain, the fellow began relighting his cigarette, which had gone out. The blood flowed, and the ram began to writhe. The conversation continued without the slightest pause. And the hens and the chickens? Every day in thousands of kitchens, heads cut off, streaming blood, they hop about, comic and dreadful, flapping their wings. And then look, a tender, refined lady will devour the corpses of these animals, fully certain that she is in the right, while asserting 2 propositions that cancel each other out. First, that she is so delicate her doctor assures her of it, that vegetable food alone cannot sustain her, and that her weak constitution requires meat. And second, that she is so sensitive that she cannot bring herself to cause animal suffering or even to bear the sight of it. But the poor lady is weak precisely because she has been taught to live on food unnatural to man, and she cannot avoid causing animal suffering because she eats them.